In the book of Hebrews, chapter 6, it says, "We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. And that hope is in Jesus Christ." I haven't introduced myself to you guys this week so far. My name is Stephen Combs. And that video you just watched is the story of my son, Connor Wayne Combs. And this is something that my wife and I have just experienced this past semester. And this past March, when my wife Caroline's water broke, we were not given much hope by the doctors. They told us that she was going to go into labor within the next 72 hours, or she was going to develop an infection and possibly put her body at risk. And so they encouraged us to abort the pregnancy. They called it inducing labor, but what they meant was we're encouraging you to abort this pregnancy. But what we chose to do was to put our hope in the Lord and to put it in His hands and trust Him that however this worked out for our son, it was not our call to say whether or not he lives, but it was going to be God's call in the end. And so even though we were given very bleak hope, we chose to go on with it. And so what you saw it say there was that we actually made it for 8 more weeks, which is just so much more than they thought that we were going to. We made it for 8 more weeks until Connor was born. And I got to say that the day that he was born, it was, like I said, 10:51 a.m. It was a pretty scary day. You know, we had kind of a roller coaster day where things were looking good one moment, looking not so good the next. And that night, we got a call at midnight. It woke us up. We had already gone to bed, and when we went to bed, they were saying we're having a hard time getting the oxygen in his lungs right. Because the problem with PPROM, was what you saw there when a woman's water breaks too early, is the fluid being low prevents the lungs from fully developing. And so he wasn't able to breathe on his own. They had to use a ventilator, and that's why he saw that tube inside of him. And so as we were going to bed that night, they said, we're having a hard time getting his oxygen level up, but he's stable right now. And so we went to sleep. They woke us up and, in a sense, basically just said, come down here quick. In their voice, we could tell that we were getting ready to spend our last moments with him. And so we went down there. They tried to get his oxygen level up, couldn't do it. Tried to revive him and couldn't do it. And so they asked my wife Caroline if she would like to hold him. And so they handed my son to her. And it was the first time we'd ever held him because we weren't allowed to touch him until that point. And he died in her arms. And so they asked us if we wanted to have our own room. And so they cleaned him all up. And we went into another room and held him. And we said goodbye to him the same day that we said hello. And in that moment, I was thinking about all the things that, just as a parent, that I had kind of intuitively, not even realizing I'd done, all these hopes and dreams that I'd had for my son just in those few months of pregnancy. The things like just picturing him being a football player, picturing him, going on a date, and just normal things that, kids go through. And another one was just picturing him becoming a Christian one day and getting baptized and living for Jesus, wanting to see him do that. And all that stuff was cut off and put to an end in that same day. And so it was very difficult for me to find hope in that moment. I had been telling everybody up to that point, I'm putting my hope in the Lord. I was really strong. I kind of just, in my head, I was thinking, he's not going to die. There's just no way he's going to die. It's too much of a miracle he's made it this far, and he's not going to let him die on us. And then he did die. And then my question to God as I was laying in bed that night, it's 3:30 a.m. I was trying to lay there just thinking, man, what do I do now? And just defeated. My son just died. And how do I move on from this? Why did God allow this to happen to me? And how is this a good plan? For him to take away a beautiful little baby that I just got to say hello to today. How is this a good plan? But then something told my brain in that moment, I was seeking God out, and something just came over me and said, you've been saying you're going to put your hope in the Lord, but now you actually need to prove it, that this is the real deal. You either put your hope in me now, or you'll never understand this, and you'll never be complete. And so I chose, in that moment, I said, I'm going to put my hope in the Lord. And so as I quoted a second ago, Hebrews chapter 6, when I put my hope in God in that moment, He became the anchor for my soul. And so, though there's been some difficult days since that night, You don't just move on from something like that the next day, wake up and okay, well that was yesterday, that's in the past. And anybody here that's ever experienced a loss, whether it be a grandparent or a mother or father, brother or sister, cousin, aunt, uncle, you know how painful it can be, and how in that moment you're questioning, God, how could a God who really loves me, how could this be a good plan? Why would he do this to me? But what it is we don't see what he sees. We don't see into the future of what he has in store. And what my wife and I have discovered is, in these past couple of months since this has happened, there's been blessings that have come our way that we couldn't have possibly received otherwise. And that because we chose to put our hope in God and not the things of this world, we didn't become bitter because of it, but God actually made us better for it. And we don't know the end of the story yet. We don't know how it's going to end. But here's the cool thing. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me." And so that night he told me, "Stephen, let your child come to me." And what I know is that when I die one day, I'm positive that I'm going to be going to heaven because I have Jesus Christ in my life. And not only that, but that when I get to heaven, I'll get to see my God, the one who I've been chasing after, Jesus Christ, and I get to see my son, Connor. And that's a great plan. That's God's plan. And his plan always ends in victory.